Welcome, everybody, to the New England Golf Radio Show. I am J.J. Truman. I got Chris Arkan behind the board this morning.
Good morning.
Doing his thing back there. We are your source for everything golf in New England, PGA Tour. We'll do some European Tour today, although I do have a little bit of a riff with what's going on in the European Tour right now, and I'll get to that later. We'll talk about that later. We have a great show lined up for today. We're going to recap the TPC at Players tournament last week, which just ended. If you saw the ending, it ended in a fashion that you feel bad for the guys, the way that it ended, and we'll talk some more about that. The Handa Cup is actually going on today. We're not going to talk about this extensively, but we had Peter Loiko on last week, and that's going on out at the Wentworth by the Sea. If you have a chance today and you think it might clear up out there, head on over there. You can check out some professional golfers hitting some professional golf shots, which is something you need to do if you haven't had the chance to do that. In the second segment, we're going to have Drew Kaiser on from the Kaiser Performance Institute. We've had him on previously. He's great. He's going to provide us with another tip to help us get through this rainy season, I guess, that we're going through, this rainy week. And you know what? I had a thought right then and there in this last 2 seconds. I'm not going to complain about the weather anymore. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to put my rain gear on. I'm going to suck it up. And I'm going to go out and play in the rain if I have to from now on. I can't afford to waste any more energy or time complaining about the weather.
I'm just happy to have survived the Rapture, to be honest with you, sir.
Absolutely. And the Rapture, we don't know what 6 p.m. that was supposed to be yesterday.
A universal 6 p.m. Wherever you were at 6 p.m.
Does that exist? There's 24 different 6 p.m.s. Anyway, we don't need to get into time zones. But the Rapture is gone. We don't need to worry about that anymore. Lastly, we'll talk about the Crown Plaza Invitational that's going on right now down in Texas at Hogan's Alley, which there's some interesting things going on down there with David Toms and what he did in the first 2 rounds there. It was certainly something we need to mention. So let's jump right into it, Chris. We got the TPC Players recap going on. And Graham McDowell last week, the guys had a rain delay. He played in the morning. He took the lead into the final round. On the 18th hole, he hit what would be considered a really good shot. The ball caught a bad bounce, hit the green. The green was so slick and slanted towards the water that it rolled into the water. Now, I could tell that this affected Graham mentally, and certainly he carried some of that over into the final round, seeing what he did in the final round, struggling with the hook. He was left off the tee in the final round all day. He relinquished the lead to David Toms, and KJ Choi stepped up and got the win there. But the big talk and the big question on the tour is, was this course set up unfairly? Because we saw a couple other things take place throughout the tournament that possibly people got bad bounces or hit the shot that they should have hit, and it didn't end up with the result that they deserved. So I got to ask you, do you think that the place was set up unfair? I don't know if you had a chance to see the Graham McDowell shot, but he did hit a great shot.
I'm familiar with what you're talking about. I think the main problem here is that the TPC is considered an easy course for everybody, and they're trying to make it harder. And I think that's may have been what caused some of this. TPC, as we were talking about just before the show started, is kind of like, I don't want to say like an exhibition course compared to some of the tougher big tournaments, but it's one that they can certainly get several birdies in a row in. Whether you're a top-tier golfer, so long as you're in the tournament, you're usually scoring pretty high at TPC. I think they're trying to change that, and that may have been what we saw with these shots here and these weird pin.
Right. And I think you're right. I think they definitely want to make the place a little bit tougher. Guys have traditionally scored fairly well there, depending on the conditions. It's tough there because the wind plays a major role in what happens on that course, and you can't always predict the wind. As we know, the weathermen up here haven't done so well over the past week in predicting what's – they did. I guess it rained every day. They said it was going to rain. But you never know what the wind's going to do there, so they try to adjust the course accordingly, and that certainly has an effect. What I don't like to hear is players say that the course is set up unfair. Golf is a game where you
unfair to who? They all had to do it.
Exactly right. That's my point. One of my points as well is everybody's got to play on the same course. Yes, the wind changes. If you play in the morning, maybe you have an advantage. If you play in the afternoon, you don't have as much of an advantage because the wind is likely to pick up. But at the same time, if you're playing in the afternoon, you're in contention to win the tournament. So why not have to deal with more difficult conditions? However, I don't like to hear players say that it's unfair. Now, Graham McDowell, to his credit, did not say that it was unfair. He just said, you know what, that's golf. And I agree with him. Sometimes you hit a really good shot and it turns out really bad. Sometimes you hit a really bad shot and it turns out really good. Mm-hmm. You know, several times you can think of your own golf game or watching people play golf where they've just absolutely shanked one and it's worked out.
Yeah.
And then you can think about that time where you just flushed one and it felt great, and it was the greatest feeling you've ever had. It was the best swing you've probably ever made, and hit a rock, bounced here, bounced there, ended up out of bounds. So it happens. It's golf. Golfers, especially on the PGA Tour, should not set the tone by saying the course was set up unfair. That being said, let's move on to what actually happened. David Toms, your guy, KJ Choi, who you did not pick, who I was begging you to pick last week.
I don't know why I strayed away from the Choi. I think that what happened was I got swept up in the Watney phenomenon. You know, the Heidi Watney being a fellow New England broadcaster, I felt like some solidarity needed to be made there.
You guys had a connection, and you felt like you needed to support her by choosing her cousins.
That's exactly what happened.
I can't blame you for that. I cannot blame you for that. I'm sure everybody out there listening won't blame you for that. So KJ Choi, David Toms end up in a playoff for the fourth week in a row on tour, which, as we talked about the previous 3 weeks, it's just creating a ton of drama for the PGA, which is great. Everybody that's a golf fan wants to see these guys in pressure-packed situations.
Every single week it's been like that.
Fourth week in a row, a playoff, which is just unbelievable. They end up in a playoff at TPC. When you reach the playoff, you go back to the 17th, which, as we talked about, is the hole where it's a 146-yard par 3, completely surrounded by water. The gallery is there. There's thousands upon thousands of people watching you hit that. So imagine the pressure standing on that tee box. You got tens of thousands of people watching you in a playoff to win $1.7 million, which was the purse for the first prize winner at TPC. And you've got to hit that shot. You've got to perform under that pressure. If you saw those guys, they were nervous. They admitted they were nervous. Choi afterwards was so nervous he couldn't get a sentence out, and it was just, you could tell that the tension was there in the air. They both hit pretty decent shots on the green. Both are left about a 3-footer. Maybe Toms had about 3.5 feet for his par. Choi had about 2.5 feet, and David Toms pulls his 3.5-footer straight up the hill left and misses it. Choi, of course, eventually drained that 2.5-footer to win the tournament and take that $1.7 million. And if you saw the look on David Toms' face, and then they jumped to his son and his wife, you could tell that they were obviously destroyed mentally. It's got to be absolutely terrible to have to deal with missing a 3-footer to win the TPC. And David Toms hasn't won for a long time. And credit to KJ Choi, because he got the victory and he played great and came from behind, and just a guy that finally got somebody to make a mistake in a situation where he could win, because that's how he plays. He plays steady, he plays solid, and he doesn't make mistakes. He lets other people make mistakes. Finally, he got somebody to make a mistake. However, you got to feel for David Toms. So this leads me to ask this question. Do you think when you get to a playoff in a PGA Tour event and there's just two guys, should we turn it into match play? Because if that's a match play event, or if that turns into match play, KJ Choi has given David Toms that putt, and David Toms has given KJ Choi that putt, and we're moving on to watch him play the 18th hole. So what do you think? Should the PGA Tour say, you know what, if it's two guys, it's essentially match play anyway, even though it's scored through stroke play? Should they just turn it to a match play format? Would that provide more drama? Would that provide less drama? What do you think?
More drama than missing a 3.5-foot putt to win. I mean, that's about as dramatic as... Well, I mean, that putt wouldn't have happened if they just conceded.
It's dramatic, right? But we don't know what would have happened after that. I mean, it's dramatic.
Well, nothing would have happened because he missed and he lost.
It's dramatic. If it was match play, they would have gave it to him. Like we said, we don't know what would have happened on the 18th hole.
Yeah.
However, nobody wants to win that way. Everybody wants to win. Nobody wants to win in that fashion. Nobody wants to see somebody lose in that fashion.
That's true.
It's demoralizing. You don't want to see David Toms lose by missing a 3.5-footer that you or I could make.
But that's sports, man. I mean, that's competition. That's what it is.
But is it less dramatic to see him do that and you just go, oh, man, that was a huge letdown? I wanted to see those guys play the 18th. I was fired up. I wasn't even really paying attention, to be honest with you. I'm thinking about, okay, what are these guys going to do on the 18th hole? Is KJ Choi going to hit driver? Is he going to hit 3-wood? Is Toms going to hit driver? Is he going to hit 3-wood? I mean, how are they going to play out this stroke play one-on-one on this 18th hole, which Toms birdied, hit about an 8 to 12-foot birdie putt there to force the playoff, which was just unbelievable. Hit his second shot out of a divot, and I wanted to see him play the hole again. So I gotta say that let's go to match play when it's just two guys. It's one-on-one. Those guys are playing against each other. Even though it's scored in strokes, let's go to match play. Let's let the best player decide it one-on-one, match play. If you have the hole, you keep moving on, you keep playing. Forget about the strokes. I think it would add drama. It certainly adds to the strategy. It puts the players in a different mindset than they are in all week when they're playing the stroke play event, when they have to just switch over to match play. If you watch what's going on right now in the Volvo World Championship match play, which we'll talk about a little bit later, you can see that these guys are playing a little bit differently. It's more strategic. You have to play the player more than the course. In the stroke play event, you have to play the course more than you do the player. Now, like I said, when you get to that playoff with just two guys, stroke play, you're essentially playing them anyway, and you don't really know. So I certainly would love to see the PGA Tour institute that. Now, obviously, if you have more than two guys in the playoff,
right,
you can't have a four-man match play event going on. That doesn't make any sense because it's not going to create the atmosphere you want. Everybody gets confused about what everybody else is doing, and then essentially players end up focusing on more of what the other guys are doing than even playing their own game because they got to keep track of three scores, and it's just way too much. So let's see the PGA Tour move into match play. Let's see these guys in the playoff get after each other in the match play format. I think it creates a ton of drama, and I think that, like I said, changes the strategy for everybody involved in it. In this situation right here, you eliminate somebody missing a 3-footer that just anybody can make to lose a golf tournament and lose $1.7 million and lose lose the opportunity to win, which David Toms hasn't done in a long while. So
2006, I think, was his last major.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, and David Toms, great guy. We were looking him up on Wikipedia before the show. LSU guy from Louisiana, had the yellow shirt on. Everybody was supporting him. I think everybody wanted to see him perform well. Not that people don't like KJ Choi, because KJ Choi is your guy, and as I said, a solid, steady player, well deserving of that victory, and that's huge for him going forward. Now his style of play has been legitimatized, and he understands that if he continues just to play his game and not make mistakes, eventually he can get people to make mistakes, especially in pressure-packed situations. So I don't know how that translates to the majors. He's hung around in a few majors in the past. He'll certainly have the opportunity to hang around at Congressional this year. I think that course sets up well for him with a left-to-right ball flight. You don't have to be super long there, but you do have to keep it in the fairway. The rough, as we know in the U.S. Open, will be penalizing everybody, and they're going to have the greens fast there as well, which is another thing that he's used to and he likes. So we'll see how that progresses for KJ. I don't know if that propels him to win a major this year or gives him the confidence to know that he can win a major, but certainly winning that tournament at TPC Sawgrass on a difficult course, which was set up, as you said earlier, to challenge the guys a little bit more. And maybe that's part of the thing that they're trying to do there, is to create that draw to prepare people for the majors. They want the best guys to show up, which they typically do, except for the Europeans that weren't there last week, which totally upset me as I talked about on the show. I didn't want to talk about them. But they're trying to get those guys to show up there to get them ready for those major championship-type courses. So TPC, all in all, great tournament to watch, good drama. Hated the ending. Feel bad for David Toms. Hopefully he bounces back this week and he put up 2 great rounds, and we'll get into those rounds later.
Yeah, but there's also a disturbing trend beginning with him, it seems like.
Right, and we'll talk about his mental state a little bit later in the show, and we'll break that down and analyze where he's probably at right now, especially since he had such a great performance in the 2 rounds, in the first 2 rounds of the Crown Plaza Invitational down there in Texas. We got to take a break right now. We're going to come back with Drew Kaiser of the Kaiser Performance Institute in Southborough, Mass. We had Drew on previous. He was talking about, do you remember what the tip was that he gave us, Chris? That you wanted to perform while driving a couple of weeks ago?
Oh, yeah, the seated curl thing. I forget what it was, but yeah.
Seated trunk turns.
Seated trunk turn. That's
seated trunk turns. And don't do those while you're driving. I remember because I've been doing them. I've been working on my game. I've been sitting in the house all day because I haven't been outside because of the rain. Oh, yeah, I'm not complaining about the rain. But we're going to have Drew on right after this. He'll give us another tip to how to get through this rainy type week that we got going on right here on WGAM.
Gunga, galunga. Gunga, gunga, gunga.